sorry we're a few minutes late. We are about to embark upon the second part of this event, and I'm delighted to introduce Tobias, who is here in Albany, in Germany, to share some of his insights around the impact of open source on industry collaboration. So, over to you, Tobias. There you go.
Thank you for the kind words, and thank you all for coming. Over the next 20 minutes or so, I would like to give you some insights from the industry perspective about open source, how we experience open source, how we try to collaborate, and what are some of the benefits, but as well the challenges we see in open source. Before getting started, let me give you some info about who I am, who I'm working for, as well as, so that you can get a second. Perfect. So I'm working for SAP, which is a software company founded now 50 years ago, and we specialize in enterprise software. We are one of the largest software companies worldwide and the biggest one in Europe, which is kind of cool. And we have around 40,000 developers and a lot of partner companies as well as customers who are building on top of our products. And that becomes important later as well. And we are both developing on-premise software, especially in the past, but now as well a lot of cloud and hybrid software, which is running pretty much everywhere. Just so to give you a sense. Within SAP, I'm part of the open source program office. We are responsible for everything open source related, be it our open source, but as well our inner source strategy. And our main task is to support our development teams in adopting open source, contributing to open source, but as well acting as a kind of steward for any kind of questions, be it from the development teams, but as well from other functions like security or legal and likes. And we as well act as a steward to the outside. So if anyone from the outside, other companies, research institutes, want to reach out and have any questions related to our open source engagement or projects, they can reach out to us and we try to connect them with the right people, and as well we try to spread the word. Lastly, a few words for myself. I'm mostly handling our technical things within the SAP OSPO. I'm a developer, so I love to break things and hopefully rebuild them in a better way afterwards. And yeah, I'm talking about open source and the three levels we see as important to that. And the first one is probably the most obvious one is, hey, consuming open source. We just use it and things. Then I will as well go a bit into the contributing aspect, how you can contribute to open source, what are some of the challenges we see there, and how we try to do things there. Lastly, and which I will focus in at the end on, is how we create our own open source projects, which are our incentives there and what are our intentions when doing them. Let's start off with consuming open source. As we heard already earlier, open source is everywhere and is used everywhere as well. And that's not different for us. We saw internally that nearly every product we are building and every software we are releasing uses open source underneath. Here, just one small library for projects which only add a very thin layer on top of that. And I did run the numbers before the presentation, and we have around 40,000, a bit more open source components which are part of our products. So a lot of open source, which is the baseline of our products. And with that many open source, there comes some challenges. One of the big ones is, hey, how do I know which open source I'm using and where is it used? And that's very important for two main reasons. The one is security. We need to ensure that we know which open source is used where. So if something happens, we can tackle it and know which development teams to reach out and improve the situation. And the second big topic is license. So open source, as you probably all know, is released under specific license, and they come not only with freedoms, but as well with requirements. For example, for attribution, or in case of GPL licenses, as well with redistribution of the changes. And so that's very important to ensure that we know which software we are using there, so we can track that. And two very concrete examples where this was super helpful was with Log4j. It's probably the most prominent example from the cover from the last years for this is a super severe severity vulnerability in Log4j. And it was very important to quickly figure out, hey, where is it used, so that we can ensure that it gets either updated or that it's not affected, or that we at least can notify development teams and affected parties quickly. And the second thing, which wasn't that time critical, but had a huge impact as well, is Grafana Labs, which changed their license from a more open license to AGPL, which comes with different restrictions, still open source, but with different restrictions. And that's something where we need to know this information to easier track what kind of where it's used and how we comply with the requirements there best. Open source consumption is great and something which helps a lot, but the really cool thing for the industry and for companies is that you can take open source and adjust it to your needs. So even if you find something that only fits 80% or 90% of your use case, you can add the remaining 10% and get something great out of it without reinventing the wheel. And while this is cool, taking something, adjusting it and using it, the more cool thing about open source is that you can actually contribute these features back. And that's something we try to emphasize as well, because it has huge improvements over just consuming it. Contributing back enables or brings two big advantages. It ensures that you give something back to the community, which is nice, but as well ensures that over the long time, the upstream project stays compatible with your own changes. So if you implement a feature on top of an open source project or a small thing which helps it, we try to encourage our development teams to contribute it back to ensure that if an upstream project introduces a bug fix or a security fix or a new feature, that these two things work together and it's an harmonious thing to do. From our, so I mentioned earlier, we have over 30,000 components we are using. While we try to address bugs and feature misses where needed, we have as well some projects where we collaborate more long term. These are mostly these projects where we have like a strategic incentive. They are foundational to our products. And I brought two examples for that as well, which is Cloud Foundry, which is an runtime, so to say, for our products, which we leverage across our suite. And that's something where we try to actively engage as well as a company becoming active members of the steering board and government board to as well drive the direction to both ensure that the product stays healthy as well as stays in a direction we which fits our needs as well, and as well ensuring that others can use it as well. And the second project where we are in a more active contributor role is the OpenJDK, which is the baseline for a Java distribution we are using internally. And all the things we need for this internal Java distribution, we try to contribute back to OpenJDK to ensure that it stays compatible to upstream changes. And so that's the second level contributing. But what is the case if there isn't something which we can use already out of the box? And that comes where the third level, creating own open source projects, come into play. And we have pretty much found that we have three main reasons or incentives for creating own open source projects which haven't existed. The one is probably the most obvious one is we try to solve any technical problem we encounter. Be it like infrastructure management, be it some other things which nobody else yet solved or solved in a way which we can reuse. And that is when we say, okay, we need to solve it, but if there would have existed something, we would have reused it. So when we try to solve that, we then try to open source it and try to get others to collaborate with us and not reinventing the wheel. Because the last thing we want is develop something and then a year later somebody else comes around and says, hey, I have the same problem, I'm trying to solve it as well. And then now we have pretty much two open source projects or two projects which try to achieve the same thing. And that's probably for both parties not the best solution. The second thing, which is more for our benefit, is open source allows for integration. So everything which customers, partners, or other entities need to integrate with our product, we try to open source as well, because it makes it way easier for others to build on top of our products, and makes it reduces barriers compared to if we provide SDKs, API clients as proprietary source. One of the challenges there is, which we saw as well internally when consuming it from others, is it's super hard to get through legal processes if you have them review some proprietary licenses, if you want to include an SDK into your own product or tool. And having them under a public license like Apache 2, MIT, whatever, makes everybody involved happy, because we will go, okay, that's Apache 2, that's fine to use, and we don't need to actually check through the terms one by one, but we can rely on, hey, it's a standard license, you can apply a standard process. It makes the whole process a bit more streamlined. And the last part I want to talk about is projects of public interest, I call them. And that's a special projects where the general public has a high interest in getting information about the project, and open source is a great way of sharing that. And I brought two examples for this. One is one from a couple of years ago, the so-called Corona Warn, which was a Corona tracing application funded by the German government with the intention of tracing and notifying people after Corona infection. There was a lot of discussion as well in the public about data privacy and ensuring that such an application can't be used or isn't used to track people individually, but only ensuring that it really is done for notification. And SAP got the job of developing that and as well open sourcing it to ensure that others can review it and ensure that it does what it claims to be. And what I found super interesting is one of the German NGOs, the Chaos Computer Club, actually got reviewed it, and they pretty much said, yeah, we found nothing to complain about, which is already pretty much the highest honor they can give. And so that's something where open source allowed allowed in theory everyone, but of course not everyone reviewed the source code, but it allowed these trusted third parties pretty much to review the source code, give their opinion about it. But, and that I found even more interesting, it allowed communities as well to take the source code and build their own application based on that. For example, we released an iOS and Android app, but for example, the community went ahead and released an F-Droid to the F-Droid App Store as well, an application based on that without our involvement. So that's really cool and helps as well to spread in a good way the adoption of the application. And that's one of them. Another cool project, which just started end of last year and has a super short name, is the Important Project of Common European Interest Next Generation Cloud Infrastructure and Services, or IPSys. And that's a project funded by the European Union to strengthen the European digital sovereignty. Aim is pretty much to be able to run cloud services in Europe independent from others. And what we are doing as part of this project, together with, I think, 50 other research and as well companies, research institutes and companies, is open sourcing a lot of our own internal infrastructure stack in the hope to get adoption from others, but as well allowing others to reuse it to build their own independent cloud. And I brought 3 examples here, which are projects you can as well already check out if you are interested in that. That's for infrastructure management on a very low level. So you have servers, plug them in. How do you manage that you have 1,000 servers running, for example, which is our Iron Core project. We have Ghana, which we are using extensively internally and have as well adoption from a few other companies and partners is a Kubernetes as a service solution, similar to, for example, Google Kubernetes Engine, allows you to run your own managed Kubernetes on top of that. And something which we just released as open source shortly before is the Cloud Operators project, which allows you then to manage a fleet of server runtimes. So you have like 100 Kubernetes clusters and you need to deploy applications on top of them across a global scale. Not a problem many people have, but something there, if you have that problem, it's rather hard to get that solved, especially in an open source way. So that's something we are now developing for next. And my last slide is just to quickly summarize the benefits we see of open source collaboration for the industry, and especially from our perspective. And I think two of the points we already heard earlier today, it improves development efficiency. It's easier to just take something which is already existing, adjust it to the needs, than reinventing the wheel completely from scratch. The second point, which goes into the same topic, is it's better to have something already existing and building on top of it than just building the whole stack on your own. And that's where it's better to come together, solve common problems, and then focus on the things which actually add value on top of that. And one thing which is new, and I haven't heard yet, is open source allows for a more standard collaboration model. With having standard licenses in place, having standard methods on how you can interact with each other in place, makes it a lot easier to collaborating with partners, but as well with other people, instead of having in a company set up, having to go through your legal department to declare an official partnership or development process with somebody else. And it allows you as well to collaborate with anybody or more or less anyone, even if they might be otherwise your commercial competitor. It allows you to solve the same technical challenges, which wouldn't happen if you need to have like an official partnership with them, which probably wouldn't happen. And I think I rushed way too quickly through the presentation because I'm already at the end. But yeah, thank you very much for your attention. I hope you could learn something, and I'm handing back to Claire.